What is up, everybody? Matt Moda here to give you some early NFL bets to lock in for championship weekend. We honestly have all the player props out. We have obviously all the mainline stuff out as well. So figured I would hop on. I'm recording this early on Monday to give you some bets that I locked in already for championship weekend. It's about 5 bets total, some juicy plus money bangers, some ladder climbs, all that good stuff. Now, to do a recap from last week, unfortunately, it was another down week that we had. Last week, we were down a little bit less than a unit. We really only had one good game, and luckily that game was amazing. The Eagles-Rams game, we cashed out Kyren Williams rushing. We cashed out our full ladder climb on Saquon Barkley rushing yards. That was the only game where we actually made money. Luckily, we made so much money in that game that we were able to withstand almost our losses from the other games. But it was just, these playoffs have not gone well for me. On the entire season, the regular season was amazing. Unfortunately, we have not been able to replicate that success yet in the playoffs. 2 more weeks to go. Hopefully this week is amazing. Hopefully the Super Bowl is amazing, and we end on a positive streak. But still up over 35 units on the year. Still up over 15% ROI on the year as well. It's perfectly acceptable numbers. But let's get into today's pick. So again, we're looking at some early lines here, and I have some bets already locked in. Number 1, we're taking Brian Robinson Jr., 40 plus rushing yards, plus 110 odds at FanDuel. This is the exact bet that I locked in. Odds haven't changed. Good to go here. Now, the Eagles' run defense, if you look at the year, very, very good. Only the 7th fewest rushing yards allowed in the entire NFL. But they have not been as good recently, and specifically in the playoffs. I mean, we look at Kyren Williams, 19 attempts for 106 yards, averaged over 5.5 yards per carry. He had a good game against the Eagles. We look at Josh Jacobs. He also had a good game against the Eagles, 18 carries for 81 yards, 4.5 yards per carry. Now, I'm not saying Brian Robinson Jr. is going to get 18, 19 rushing attempts. He'll probably get between 12 and 15 if I had to guess. So his rushing attempts is another over that I like. But I think that he can get 4 yards per carry in these games. Now, if we look at Robinson on the year, he's gone over in 10 of 16 games, so he's been relatively good. His attempts is what I love. I mean, he's gone over 10 or more attempts in every single game except for 3. As you can see, there's 3 that he didn't. And the games that he didn't, where a game which they were losing all game against the Cowboys, they only had 37% run rate. And then it was week 18 against the Cowboys, which doesn't really count. That was a weird game. They benched Jaden Daniels at halftime just to rest him, and only a 33% rush rate in that game as well. So you can almost take those 2 games out. And those are 2 of the games that he did go under. Now, he went over in the first game against the Eagles with 63 receiving yards. He went under the next game against the Eagles, only 24 rushing yards, but he fumbled twice in that game, and he still had the attempts. He still had 10 attempts in that game as well. Just didn't do anything with it. He also fumbled twice. That's unlikely to happen. So it's a volume play on Brian Robinson Jr., who's probably going to get 10 plus attempts. An Eagles run defense that hasn't quite been as good recently as they have been on the entire season. So 1 unit for Brian Robinson to go 40 plus rushing yards for plus 110 odds, I think is really, really good. Our next play, and why not? Let's go right back to Saquon Barkley. And I get that these lines are crazy. I mean, if you want to take his main line, you can at 123.5 rushing yards is crazy. I took 140 plus for a unit at this exact price, plus 140 at DraftKings. So again, nothing has changed in terms of this. And I also took for him to get to 150 plus rushing yards, plus 200 at FanDuel, put a half unit on this bad boy. So 1 unit on 140 plus, half unit on 150 plus. I'm not overthinking it anymore. I went so long without betting a Saquon Barkley rushing prop, and it's just bad betting by me. I tried to get cheeky. I took Kenny Gainwell. I took his receiving yards. I tried to do everything I could except for Saquon Barkley rushing yards, which is just not the smartest thing to do, honestly. He's ran for 150 yards in 3 out of his last 4 games. The one that he missed was last week against the Packers, which if that game was close, he would have hit this because he had a long run that he slid at like the 40-yard line. He could have gone to 60 more yards. It's just impossible to stop this Eagles run attack. Look at how he did the first time against the Commanders, 150 rushing yards. Look what he did the first game against the Commanders, 146 rushing yards. I get Jalen Hurts is banged up. The Eagles passing offense looks like a total and complete mess. It hasn't mattered yet. I don't think it's going to matter in this game. I think Saquon's going to continue to have just a ton of success. And you can run on this Commanders defense. Like you look at a lot of their advanced stats, it doesn't show a top run defense. Like if we just look, raw rushing yards per game, the Commanders are allowing the 3rd most in the NFL. Explosive run rate, the Commanders are allowing the 8th most in the NFL. Explosive run rate, percentage of runs that go for 15 plus yards, 8th highest. Explosive percent of yards against them that come from explosive runs, 10th most. We look at stuff rate, which is a really important metric, especially against this Eagles offense, which gets such good push. The Commanders have the 8th worst stuff rate in the NFL. And stuff is exactly what it says on the screen here. Any run that doesn't result in a first down or touchdown results in less than 4 yards on first down or less than 3 yards on any other down. The Commanders do not get a ton of push. Missed tackles per attempt, the 6th highest in the NFL. I mean, they're tied with a bunch of teams at 0.17. So between 6th and 10th, but whatever, that still means that they allow a decent amount of tackles. And we look at even more advanced stats. Adjusted rushing yards before contact, both on the offensive and defensive side. So the Eagles, the second best, only behind the Ravens. This essentially measures how much push the Eagles' offensive line gets. It takes out QB scrambles, trick plays, QB kneels, just normal running back rush attempts. How far does the running back get before they are contacted? The Eagles, second best in the NFL. On the opposite side of that, so how do the Commanders fare? Again, how many yards does a running back get before they're contacted? Commanders are the worst in the NFL. Now, the Commanders offense is amazing. They're going to score up and down, run up and down on the Eagles offense, the Eagles defense. But you can run on this Commanders team, and the Eagles are not going to abandon the run, even if their passing offense is terrible and they can't do anything. Like this game, Jalen Hurts got hurt on the second drive. Saquon Barkley still ran for 150 yards in this game. So even though they won last week, Jahmyr Gibbs ran all over the Commanders. The week before that, it was Bucky Irving who ran all over the Commanders until the fourth quarter when the Bucs turned it over and then had to pass the ball. So Saquon Barkley, he's just in don't overthink it category. Take his his rushing yards. Next up, we're heading to the Bills versus Chiefs game, the next game. And I took Dalton Kincaid over 31.5 receiving yards. Even though it feels like he's had kind of a gross year, Kincaid's actually hit this number in 60% of his games. Now, he did miss it against the Chiefs earlier. Oh, he didn't play. That's what it was. He didn't play against the Chiefs earlier this year, so we don't really have any of that data. But it's a matchup play. Last week, we targeted Dalton Schultz. The Daltons have success against the Chiefs. That's just strictly analysis for you. But we took Dalton Schultz against the Chiefs. He hit on the first play of the game. Now we're going with Dalton Kincaid. It's all because of the Chiefs, who allow a ton of receiving yards to tight ends. Literally number one in terms of receiving yards allowed to tight ends. We've been on this all year, taking tight end receiving props against the Chiefs. It's come through for us more often than not. The Chiefs don't allow any receiving work to the running back. They don't allow any receiving work really to the wide receivers. It all goes to the tight end. And it's, it happened in week 1 against Isaiah Likely. It happened last week against Dalton Schultz. Now, it's always scary trusting a pass catcher for the Bills, but Kincaid at least gets relatively consistently targeted. I mean, he did get hurt in a couple of these games, but we look at the targets here. Only 2 last week against the Ravens, which is not great. He had 3 last week against the Broncos, cashed all 3, had 47 yards. But we look at the meat of the season. I mean, 4 or more in 10, 11 straight games, with 7 a lot of these games, 10 targets against the Dolphins. The wide receivers, it's hard to trust. You never know who it's going to be. The tight ends for the Bills, Josh Allen will throw to. I mean, Dawson Knox, when Dalton Kincaid was out, Dawson Knox hit his receiving prop over against the Chiefs. So Dalton Kincaid receiving yards, I absolutely love. This is our first play in this Bills-Chiefs game, our second play, or our third play overall, excuse me. Next up, we're going with Sammy Perine over 8.5 receiving yards, minus 110 odds at DraftKings. This is the exact bet that I locked in. Nothing has changed here. Now, this might seem like a random market, Sammy Perine receiving yards, but he's actually quietly hit it in 14 of 18 games this season. And even if we look at games where they had both Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco, right? We want to see, like, all right, when they have all their guys healthy, how is he doing? It's only been 6 games. He's hit it in 5 of 6. Now, he missed it last week against Houston. Houston doesn't allow any receiving work go to the running back, so that was never going to be a game that we targeted him in. But he cashed it in the first 5 games against, or when these guys played together. Now, he did miss it the first time against the Bills. He had 8 receiving yards. That would be brutal if he landed on exactly 8, and we just get hooked out of a loss in this one. Unfortunately, that stuff happens. But he's the third down running back for the Chiefs. He's the receiving running back for the Chiefs. And he's got a great matchup against the Bills, who allow the most receiving yards per game to running backs. They also allow the second most receptions to running backs as well. And they allow the second highest target share go to the running back. About 19% of targets against the Bills go to the running back. Now, Sammy Perine didn't. The scary part is his targets, right? Like if we look at his targets, some games he's only getting one target, but he's sometimes also cashing it on one target. Basically, like if he's open and Mahomes throws to him, it's because he's mostly wide open. So it's gonna have a high catch rate. I mean, he catches 80% of his targets, and more often than not, he can get there on one target. Like we've seen multiple times this year where he's gotten there on one target, hit it in one target, hit it in one target, hit it in one target. So he can definitely do it. It's a great matchup for him, for Sammy Perine against this Bills defense that gives up a lot of receiving work to the running back. And then the last play that we have here in terms of our official bets is Kareem Hunt. I'm taking him on the anytime touchdown. Now, I put a half unit on this bad boy. I got it at plus 210. I would still take it at plus 200. Honestly, this is a play on the number. It should not be priced at plus 200 for Kareem Hunt to score a touchdown in this game. It's positive EV. If you trust Outliers advanced metrics, it's positive EV by about the 7% to 2%, depending on what method you look at to devig the market. So right off the bat, that looks pretty good. Now, he was hot at the beginning of the year, and he's been hot now. He scored last week against the Chiefs in the last 3 games that the Chiefs have actually played football and tried. He has scored a touchdown. And the biggest thing here is the red zone rush attempt share. Now, Pacheco's back. So let's look at games just in which he's played with Pacheco and how many of the running back rush attempts he gets in, or just the rush attempts in general he gets in the red zone. He gets about 35%, which isn't amazing, but he gets more than Isaiah Pacheco. Now, he only had 1 last week, but that turned into a touchdown. Pacheco had 2 last week, but he had 0 this week. He doesn't have nearly as many red zone rush attempts as Pacheco. Pacheco has fewer red zone rush attempts than Kareem Hunt. That's what I'm trying to say here. And again, it's just a play on the number. The Chiefs are going to get in the red zone. They're going to run more often than you think, even though they have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. And they're going to run it with Kareem Hunt more often than not, who's been really good recently. Like, again, the last 3 games he's played, he has scored a rushing touchdown. And it might only take 1 carry, but if they're at the 1-yard line and they run it, they're going to give it to Kareem Hunt. So that's our 5th and final official bet of the game. Now, in terms of the main lines, I do just want to tell you guys where I'm looking here. I'm not going to bet either of these. In terms of the Eagles versus Commanders, I actually like the Commanders on the spread, plus 5.5. I honestly see both sides. If I choose the Eagles, people are going to call me a homer, and they're going to say, how can you bet against Jaden Daniels? If I choose Washington, people are going to say, how can you bet against the Eagles at home? Have you seen Saquon Barkley? Blah, blah, blah. I just think that the Commanders are going to keep this game close. I think it's going to be within a field goal. The Commanders' offense is just impossible to stop with Jaden Daniels, and the Eagles' defense is really good. The run defense hasn't been as good recently, and Jalen Hurts is banged up. We don't know if he's going to be healthy, how he's going to look, all that stuff. So there's just more avenues for the Commanders to cover the spread. And then in the next game, Chiefs, they just win every game. You can complain about the refs. Give me Buffalo money line. I think this is the year Buffalo gets them. They're built for it. They match up really well against the Chiefs. Josh Allen with his legs. Their tight ends are going to have success. And I just think that this is the year that the Bills get it done. So give me the Bills money line. Again, these aren't official bets. They're just leans. But that's all we got. 5 official bets for you guys to lock in. Make sure to like the video, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I appreciate everybody for watching. Make sure to bet responsibly and have a good one.